You told yourself you were going to do it tomorrow, and tomorrow came. And you did not do it, so you told yourself again, tomorrow, definitely tomorrow. And there was something in you that believed it, something that actually felt the intention. It was real. The feeling was real. You meant it, and then you didn't do it. And here is the part nobody talks about. You were not surprised. Somewhere inside you, something already knew. Something was watching you make the promise and already knew you would not keep it. And you felt that. You felt that quiet knowing. But you said the words anyway. You made the plan anyway. You set the alarm anyway. And when you broke it, you did not feel guilt exactly. You felt something quieter than guilt, something more familiar, like you had confirmed something about yourself that you were hoping was not true. That is what we are going to talk about tonight. Not the broken promise, not the procrastination, not the habit you cannot stop. We are going to talk about the thing underneath all of that. The reason you cannot fully trust the voice inside you anymore. The reason when you say, I will change, some part of you does not believe it. The reason you can feel two completely different things at the same time. One part of you wanting to grow, another part of you pulling away from it, and you do not know which one is actually you. That is the real problem, and it is not what you think it is. Most people, when they feel this split inside themselves, they call it laziness. They say, I am just lazy, I am just undisciplined, I just need more willpower. And so they try harder, they make stricter rules, they punish themselves more, they set harder targets. And sometimes it works for a few days, maybe a week, and then it collapses again, and then they call themselves lazy again, and the cycle continues. But here is what nobody told you. Laziness is not the root. Laziness is a symptom. It is the surface. And if you keep treating the surface, the root keeps growing. The root is something older, something deeper, something that has been building inside you for a long time, maybe years, maybe since you were very young. And the root has a name in a tradition much older than modern psychology. It is called the Nafs. Now, do not close yourself off at that word. Do not think this is going to become a religious lecture. It is not. Because the Nafs is not a religious concept that only applies to prayer and worship. The Nafs is a psychological reality. It is the part of you that you experience every single day. Every time you resist something good, every time you chase something that leaves you empty, every time you feel pulled in two directions and do not know which one to follow. That is the Nafs. And right now, without you realizing it, your Nafs is running more of your life than you are. Let us go back to something specific. Think about the last time you genuinely wanted to change something about yourself. Not a passing thought, an actual decision, a moment where you felt it clearly, where you said to yourself, this has to stop, or I need to start doing this, or I cannot keep living like this. Remember that moment? Now think about what happened next. Not days later, not weeks later, hours later, maybe the same night, maybe the next morning. Something shifted, the feeling faded, the urgency disappeared, and in its place came something else. A heaviness, a resistance, a sudden awareness of how difficult the change would be, a thought that said, maybe not now, maybe after I finish this thing, maybe when my life is less complicated. And you listened to it, and you called that listening being realistic. But that voice, the one that appeared right after your decision, that was not realism. That was not wisdom. That was the Nafs defending itself. Because here is something most people never understand. The Nafs does not want you to change. Not because it hates you, but because it is designed to protect what is familiar. It is designed to keep you exactly where you are. Because where you are feels safe, even if it is hurting you, even if it is suffocating you. Familiar pain feels safer to the Nafs than unfamiliar growth. So every time you decide to change, the Nafs begins working quietly, immediately. It does not argue with you directly. It is much smarter than that. It makes you tired. It makes the task feel bigger than it is. It shows you a reason to wait. It reminds you of how many times you have tried before and failed. And then it offers you something easier, a small comfort, a distraction, something to take the edge off the discomfort of deciding to be different. And you take it, and you call it resting, and you are not even aware that anything happened. This is the movement of the Nafs. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not come to you in obvious temptation. It comes in the form of reasonable thoughts, logical delays, understandable excuses. That is what makes it so dangerous. You cannot fight something you cannot see, and the Nafs has made itself invisible to you. It has dressed itself in the language of your own voice, so when it speaks, it sounds like you. It feels like your own thinking, your own judgment, and this is the moment everything starts to unravel. Because once you cannot tell the difference between your voice and the Nafs, you cannot trust yourself anymore. Not fully. You start second-guessing your own decisions. You make a plan and immediately wonder if you will actually follow it. You feel motivated and immediately wait for the motivation to betray you because it has before. You start watching yourself from a distance, observing yourself like a stranger, noticing the gap between what you say and what you do, and that gap starts to define you. In your own mind, quietly, without saying it to anyone, you begin to believe that you are someone who cannot be trusted, even by yourself. And that belief is more damaging than any bad habit you have ever had. Think about what it means to not trust yourself. It means that every positive thought you have, you also have a doubt waiting behind it. Every intention carries a silent question. Will I actually do this? Every moment of clarity is followed by the fear that the clarity will not last. You cannot be fully present in your own decisions because there is always a part of you watching, waiting for you to fail again. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is what happens when the Nafs has been left unexamined for long enough. When you have been running on autopilot for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to be in control of yourself. And the terrifying thing is that most people go their entire lives without noticing this. They think the problem is outside. They think if their circumstances changed, they would change. If they had more money, they would be more disciplined. If they had a better job, they would be more motivated. If they had fewer responsibilities, they would have more time to work on themselves. But circumstances do not change the Nafs. You can change every external variable in your life and still find yourself 6 months later doing the same things, feeling the same resistance, making the same promises, breaking the same promises, because the problem was never outside. The problem is the internal architecture, the system that is running underneath everything you do. And until you understand that system, nothing changes, not permanently. Let us go deeper into this system. Inside you right now, there are not one but multiple forces operating at the same time. You have felt this. You know this. You have felt the part of you that wants to be better, that genuinely, sincerely wants to grow, to improve, to live in alignment with something higher than comfort. And you have felt the other part, the part that resists that wanting, the part that says, no, not now, stay here, this is enough. And then there is a third thing, quieter than both, something that watches, something that knows, something that does not pull you in either direction but is simply present, witnessing everything. In the tradition of those who have studied the human interior most carefully, these three things have names: the Nafs, the qalb, the ruh. The Nafs is the self that pulls toward the immediate, toward comfort, toward desire, toward what feels good right now, even if it is destroying you slowly. The qalb is the heart, not the emotional heart that Western culture talks about, the spiritual heart, the center of your awareness, the place where your real-life decisions are made. The qalb is where you actually are, and the qalb can be in different states. It can be alive, awake, clear, or it can be clouded, divided, pulled, confused, and the Ruh, the spirit, the part of you that was breathed into you before you had a name, before you had a history, before you had all these layers of personality and habit and wound. The Ruh is not troubled. The Ruh is not confused. The Ruh knows. But you have covered it with so much noise that you can barely hear it anymore. Now here is the thing that changes how you see yourself. The conflict you feel, the split, the two voices, the broken promises, the self-sabotage is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that your qalb is in a state of conflict, that the Nafs has been speaking loudly and the Ruh has been speaking quietly, and you have been listening to the wrong one for so long that you have started to think the loud voice is the real one. But it is not. When Al-Ghazali studied the human soul centuries ago, he noticed something that modern psychology is only beginning to catch up to. He noticed that the greatest battles a human being fights are not fought in the world. They are fought in the interior, in that invisible space between impulse and action, between desire and decision. He noticed that people are not destroyed by their enemies. They are destroyed by themselves, by the parts of themselves they do not examine, by the Nafs that operates in darkness because they have never shone any light on it. And he noticed something else, that the Nafs has levels, that it is not a fixed thing, that it can be low, animalistic, driven by pure impulse, or it can be struggling, aware of itself, in conflict, or it can be at peace, calm, aligned with something higher. And the movement between these levels is the whole interior life of a human being. Most people are stuck in the second level, the struggling Nafs, the Nafs that knows better but does not do better, that feels the truth but does not live by it, that makes promises to itself and breaks them, that is aware of its own patterns but cannot seem to escape them. This is you. This is most people. And the reason you are stuck there is not because you are bad, it is because you are confused. You have been given a soul with enormous capacity but no map for its interior, no understanding of what is happening inside you or why. And without a map, you keep wandering, you keep repeating, you keep returning to the same places wondering why the scenery never changes. Let us get specific again. Let us talk about something you have experienced but perhaps never named. You are scrolling, late at night, or early in the morning, or in the middle of the day when you should be doing something else, and you know you should stop. There is a part of you that knows clearly that this is wasting your time, that there is something better you could be doing, that every minute here is a minute you are not spending on something that actually matters, and you keep scrolling. Now the common understanding of this moment is that you are being lazy, that you lack discipline, that you need to just put the phone down and be stronger. But what is actually happening is more interesting than that. What is happening is that the Nafs has found your exact vulnerability. It has found the precise point where your resistance is lowest. And it is not offering you the phone as a reward. It is offering it to you as a refuge. A refuge from what? From the discomfort of being present with yourself, because being present with yourself means sitting with the awareness of the gap between who you are and who you want to be. That gap is uncomfortable. It produces a low-level anxiety, a quiet dissatisfaction. And the Nafs has learned that if it gives you something to look at, something to consume, something to react to, you will not have to sit with that discomfort. So you do not sit with it. And every time you avoid it, the gap grows slightly wider. The discomfort becomes slightly stronger. And the Nafs become slightly more skilled at pulling you away from it, until the gap becomes the defining feature of your interior life, the thing you are always running from, the thing you cannot look at directly. And this is when the trust breaks, because you can feel it. You can feel the running, and you can feel that you are the one doing it. And so you cannot trust the version of yourself that runs. You cannot trust your own decisions. You cannot trust your own intentions, because you have watched yourself run too many times. Now here is the deeper layer. the one most people never reach. The scrolling, the avoidance, the broken promises, these are not the disease. They are the symptoms of a qalb that has become divided. The qalb, the heart, is not designed to be divided. It is designed to have one direction, one orientation, one thing it is pointing toward. When the qalb is unified, there is no internal conflict. You decide something and you do it. You feel one thing and you act in alignment with it. There is coherence. There is trust between what you feel and what you do. But when the qalb becomes divided, when it is pointing in multiple directions at once, when one part wants this life and another part wants a completely different life, when you are genuinely pulled toward growth but also genuinely attached to staying the same, the qalb cannot function the way it is supposed to, and you feel this as internal noise. That constant low-level sense that something is not right, that you are not fully where you are supposed to be, that there is a version of yourself that is more real than the one you are currently living as, and you cannot reach it. That is not anxiety. That is not depression. That is the qalb trying to tell you something. It is telling you that it is divided, that it needs to find its direction, that the nafs has been pulling it in too many directions for too long, and something needs to change. And now we come to the part that is the hardest to hear. The divided qalb does not just affect your habits, it affects your perception. When the qalb is divided, you stop seeing yourself clearly. You cannot accurately assess your own intentions. You cannot tell when you are being honest with yourself and when you are rationalizing. You cannot distinguish between a genuine decision and a momentary feeling that will disappear by morning. This is why you have broken promises to yourself, not because you are weak, but because when you made the promise, your qalb was in a certain state, and by the time the moment came to keep the promise, your qalb had shifted, the feeling had changed, the direction had changed, and the promise felt like it was made by someone else, a version of you that no longer exists in this moment. And so you break it, and you break it not with malice but with a genuine feeling that you cannot explain. You felt it, and then you did not feel it. And without the feeling, the action feels impossible. This is the trap of the divided qalb. It makes consistency feel impossible, because consistency requires that the qalb remain in the same direction across time, and a divided qalb cannot do that. It shifts, it moves, it follows the loudest voice, and the loudest voice is almost always the nafs. Think about a specific pattern you have in your life. Not a habit necessarily, a pattern, something that repeats itself. Maybe it is the way you approach relationships. Maybe it is the way you respond to stress. Maybe it is the way you collapse after a period of effort. Maybe it is the way you self-sabotage exactly when things start going well. You have noticed this pattern. You have probably named it. You have probably tried to change it, and it keeps coming back. And here is what most people conclude when a pattern keeps coming back despite their efforts to change it. They conclude that they are fundamentally flawed, that there is something wrong with them at a deep level, that maybe this is just who they are. But that is not what the pattern is telling you. The pattern is telling you something much more precise. It is telling you that the root has not been touched. You have been cutting the branches, changing behaviors, adjusting routines, trying new habits. But the root, the nafs structure underneath all of those behaviors, has not been examined, has not been changed, has not even been seen clearly. And the root will always produce new branches, always. No matter how many times you cut them, the pattern is not evidence of your fundamental nature. It is evidence that something deeper is still operating unchallenged. And that is not hopeless. That is actually very specific information. It is telling you exactly where to look. Let us talk about self-sabotage, because this is the one that confuses people the most. You are moving forward. Things are going well. You have momentum. Maybe for the first time in a long time, you are building something, making progress, feeling like yourself again, and then you do something that destroys it. Sometimes you are aware of what you are doing while you are doing it. You can almost watch yourself from outside, thinking this is a mistake, knowing this is going to set you back, and doing it anyway. And afterwards you feel something that is not quite guilt. It is something more bewildering, a kind of exhausted recognition, like you have confirmed something you did not want to confirm about yourself. Why does this happen? The nafs, when it feels that the qalb is moving toward a state it is not familiar with, when it feels the discomfort of growth, of unfamiliar territory, of becoming a different version of yourself, it does something extraordinary. It manufactures crisis. It does not do this consciously. You do not sit down and think, I am going to sabotage this. But the nafs, working in the deeper layers of your psychology, finds the exact pressure point that will collapse what is being built. Because destruction is familiar, return to zero is familiar, starting over is familiar. And the nafs prefers familiar suffering to unfamiliar peace. Read that again slowly. The nafs prefers familiar suffering to unfamiliar peace. This is why people stay in bad relationships, not because they love suffering, but because the specific shape of that suffering is known to them. And the alternative, a relationship that is healthy, a life that is aligned, a version of themselves that is whole, feels strange, uncertain, threatening in a way they cannot name. And the nafs responds to that threat by returning to what it knows. This is not weakness. This is the nafs operating exactly as it is designed to operate. It is protecting the familiar. And until you understand this, you will keep blaming yourself for something that requires understanding, not punishment. Now, let us talk about the thing that is actually happening when you feel something is off but cannot explain it. You know this feeling. You might be in the middle of a perfectly ordinary day. You might have everything you thought you needed, a job, a routine, people around you, and there is this quiet, persistent feeling that something is missing, that this is not it, that there is a life somewhere that is more real than this one, and you are not living it. People usually describe this feeling as emptiness, or restlessness, or vague dissatisfaction, but it is not emptiness. Emptiness is a feeling of nothing. What you are feeling is the opposite. It is the feeling of something that has not been given space, something that has been covered, ignored, postponed, deferred. It is the ruh. The ruh does not shout, it does not demand, it does not threaten, but it is always present. And when you are far from it, when your life is pointed in a direction that has nothing to do with what the ruh is oriented toward, you feel it as this quiet wrongness, this sense that the life you are living is somehow slightly off from the life that is actually yours. And most people, rather than turning toward that feeling, run from it. Because turning toward it means facing how far you have gone, how long you have been running, how many promises you have made to yourself and broken, how many times you chose comfort over truth, and that is painful. So instead, you consume, you scroll, you busy yourself, you plan, you make new promises, you tell yourself that next week, or next month, or when this phase of life is over, you will finally get to the real thing. But the ruh does not wait indefinitely. And the longer you wait, the wider the gap between who you are and who you know you could be. And the wider the gap, the less you trust yourself. And the less you trust yourself, the harder it is to take the steps that would close it. This is the cycle. This is the loop. And you have been in it longer than you realize. There is a concept that Al-Ghazali describes in a way that cuts right through everything. He talks about the ghafla, the heedlessness, the state of being spiritually and psychologically asleep while appearing to be awake. And he describes it not as a sudden fall, but as a gradual drift, a series of small, almost invisible movements away from awareness, a slow thickening of the veil between you and your actual interior. And the terrifying thing about ghafla is that the deeper you are in it, the less you feel it. In the beginning, When you first started running from yourself, there was pain. There was a sharp awareness of the gap. There was something that felt like loss. But the nafs is adaptive. It numbs, it adjusts, it builds tolerance. So after enough time, the running does not feel like running anymore. It feels like life, normal life, just how things are. You forget that you forgot. You stop noticing the gap because you have lived in it long enough that it feels like ground. And this is the most dangerous state. Not pain, not crisis, normalcy. The normalcy of being far from yourself. Because pain motivates, crisis shakes you awake, but normalcy keeps you still. It tells you everything is fine while you slowly move further from the person you were meant to be. Now let us talk about identity. Because all of this, the broken promises, the patterns, the self-sabotage, the running, all of it leads to one central outcome. You start building an identity around the wrong version of yourself. You start identifying as someone who cannot follow through, someone who tries but fails, someone with potential that never quite materializes, someone who feels deeply but cannot translate that feeling into action. And identity is the most powerful force in human psychology, more powerful than motivation, more powerful than willpower, more powerful than any habit system or productivity tool, because you always act in alignment with who you believe you are. If you believe you are someone who cannot be trusted, you will not trust yourself. If you believe you are someone who always eventually self-sabotages, you will self-sabotage. If you believe the gap between who you are and who you want to be is your permanent condition rather than a temporary one, the gap will remain permanent, not because you are weak, because identity shapes behavior at a level that conscious effort cannot reach. This is why effort alone never works. You can try as hard as you want, you can read every book, follow every system, and if deep down, underneath all of that effort, there is a belief that says this is not really who you are, that effort will collapse every time. The nafs uses identity against you. It takes every past failure and builds a story about who you are, and it keeps adding evidence. Every broken promise becomes another data point. Every returned habit becomes further proof. Every moment of self-sabotage confirms what the nafs has been saying all along. You are this. This is who you are. Accept it. But that is a lie. It is the nafs speaking. It is the voice of the accumulated weight of unexamined patterns pretending to be truth. So what is actually true? Here is what is actually true. The part of you that wants to be better is real, not a fantasy, not wishful thinking, not the naive optimism of someone who does not know themselves. It is real. It has always been real. Every sincere moment of wanting to change, every genuine intention, every time you felt that quiet ache of knowing you could live differently, that was real. The Ruh was speaking. The deepest part of you was pointing in a direction, and the nafs was loud, and the qalb was divided, and the gap between intention and action seemed impossible to cross. But the wanting was always real. And here is the other thing that is true. The patterns that have defined you are not you. They are not your essence. They are the result of an interior system that has been running without examination, without light, without the kind of clear-eyed awareness that allows change to actually happen. The nafs can change. This is not a religious nicety. This is an observed reality. The nafs that was loud can become quieter. The qalb that was divided can find its direction. The Ruh that was buried under layers of noise can begin to be heard again, but not through effort alone, not through a new productivity system, not through another commitment to discipline, not through punishing yourself into a different shape, through understanding, through the kind of honest, patient, undefended looking at yourself that most people avoid because it is uncomfortable. Through sitting with the gap instead of running from it, through hearing the nafs for what it is instead of mistaking it for your true voice. Let us talk about what this looking actually feels like, because I do not want to leave this abstract. The looking is not meditation necessarily. It is not a spiritual practice necessarily. It is simpler and more uncomfortable than either of those things. It is the moment you catch yourself doing the thing, the scrolling, the avoidance, the choosing comfort over the harder, true thing. And instead of immediately surrendering to it or immediately fighting it, you simply observe it, you watch it. You notice the specific feeling that preceded it, the discomfort that the nafs was moving you away from. You name it, not to judge it, just to see it. This is a form of inner witnessing that the tradition calls muraqabah, watchfulness, awareness of the interior, noticing what is happening inside you before you act, rather than only noticing it after you have already acted. And when you begin to practice this, even imperfectly, even inconsistently, something shifts, not dramatically, not overnight, but something shifts, because the nafs operates in darkness, in automaticity, in the space of unexamined impulse, and the moment you shine awareness on it, it loses some of its power. Not all of it, but some. And some is enough to create a moment of choice, and in that moment of choice, something new becomes possible. Here is a truth about change that almost no one talks about. Change is not a decision. Change is not an intention. Change is not even a moment of clarity. Change is a direction. It is the orientation of the qalb over time. It is the slow, imperfect, inconsistent movement of the heart towards something. Not arriving, just moving, just facing. And this is why the person who falls and returns is closer to change than the person who never falls, but also never truly faces their interior. Because falling and returning requires honesty. It requires the painful acknowledgement that the nafs pulled you, that you listened, that the gap is real. And it requires the act of turning back toward the direction you want to face. That turning, in Arabic, is called watba, and it is not a single dramatic moment. It is a practice, a continuous practice of noticing where you have drifted and returning to your direction, not in shame, not in self-punishment, but in clear-eyed honesty. This is what the person who cannot trust themselves needs to understand. Trust is not rebuilt through a perfect streak. Trust is not rebuilt through never failing. Trust is rebuilt through the practice of returning, through demonstrating to yourself over and over, in small ways and large ways, that when you drift, you come back, that the drift is not the end, that the return is always available to you. The qalb that returns is the qalb that begins to heal its division. There is something else I want to say about the way you speak to yourself after you fail, because this is where most people cause themselves the most damage. After a broken promise, after a relapse into a pattern, after a moment of self-sabotage, most people go into one of two modes. The first is harsh, brutal self-criticism. You are so weak. You always do this. What is wrong with you? You will never change. This is who you are. The second looks like the opposite but produces the same result. It is the immediate comfort, the dismissal, the "it's fine, I'll do better tomorrow. Let's not make a big deal of this." The rush to feel okay before actually sitting with what happened. Both of these avoid the actual work. The harsh voice is the nafs punishing you to avoid examining itself, because if it can make you feel terrible enough about what happened, you will be too busy suffering to actually see what caused it. The comforting voice is the nafs soothing you back to sleep, dissolving the discomfort before it can teach you anything. The actual work is in the space between these two. It is sitting with what happened without either condemning yourself or excusing yourself. It is looking at it honestly, seeing the nafs at work, understanding the moment when the choice was made, and then making a different choice about how to respond, not with punishment, not with dismissal, with understanding. This is the only thing that actually changes the interior. Understanding the nafs does not weaken it immediately, but it begins the long process of moving the qalb toward a place where the nafs no longer has the same authority, where its voice is heard but not automatically obeyed, where you can feel the pull and still choose the direction. I want to say something now about the concept of trust, because we began with this and we need to return to it. You cannot trust yourself right now in the way you want to, because the you that you are trusting is not a unified thing. It is a shifting, divided, multiple thing. It is the nafs today and the ruh tomorrow, and the qalb somewhere between them always. And trusting that shifting thing is like trying to stand on water. But here is what you can trust. You can trust the direction, not the feelings, not the intentions, not the momentary clarity that comes and goes, but the direction, the orientation, the thing you are pointing toward. If the qalb is oriented toward truth, toward alignment, toward something real, then even when the nafs pulls and the feelings shift and the clarity disappears, the direction remains, and you can return to it. This is a different kind of self-trust than the one you have been trying to build. You have been trying to trust that you will always feel motivated, that the intention will always be strong, that the clarity will never fade. That trust will always break, because feelings and intentions and clarity are not stable. They are not supposed to be stable. They are weather. They change. But a direction is not weather. A direction is where you have decided to face, and the practice is to keep facing there, even when you cannot see clearly, even when the nafs is loud, even when the qalb is heavy. Keep facing there, not because you are strong enough, but because you have understood what is at stake. Let us come to something very precise now. There is a difference between the person who does not trust themselves because they have never seriously tried, and the person who does not trust themselves because they have tried sincerely and found something inside them that seems to resist all sincere effort. If you are the second person, this is specifically for you. The reason sincere effort has not been enough is not that you lack something. It is that the effort has been directed at the surface while the root was undisturbed. And the root is the relationship between your qalb and what it is oriented toward. Your qalb has been oriented partly or mostly toward dunya, toward the world, toward the things of this life, comfort, validation, certainty, control, not because you chose this deliberately, but because that is the default orientation when the nafs has been in charge. And no amount of behavioral effort will shift a qalb that is pointed in the wrong direction. What shifts the qalb is something the tradition calls dhikr, remembrance. Not necessarily formal prayer, though that is part of it, but the practice of remembering, actually remembering, that there is something beyond the noise, that the ruh inside you is oriented towards something that the nafs cannot touch, that the true self, the deepest self, is not the one that scrolls and avoids and breaks promises. The true self is the one that returns. Every time you return, you are listening to the ruh. Every time you choose the harder true thing, you are listening to the ruh. Every time you sit with discomfort, instead of running from it, you are listening to the ruh. And the more you listen to the ruh, the quieter the nafs becomes. Not silent. It will never be fully silent in this life, but quieter, more observable, less automatic, and that is enough. That is more than enough, because quiet is the beginning of choice, and choice is the beginning of a life you can actually trust yourself to live. I want to pause here and say something that I want you to actually feel, rather than just understand. You are not the problem. The system inside you that is creating these patterns, the divided qalb, the loud nafs, the buried ruh, this system did not form because of some fundamental flaw in your nature. It formed because of time, because of accumulated choices, many of them made unconsciously, because of a world that constantly feeds the nafs and almost never speaks to the ruh. You are not broken. you are lost. And there is an enormous difference between those two things. Broken things need to be replaced. Lost things need to be found. And you have not lost anything that is not still inside you. The qalb that was clear is still capable of clarity. The ruh that was heard is still speaking. The direction that felt obvious when you were young and less complicated has not disappeared. It has been covered, and it can be uncovered, not all at once, not without difficulty, not without returning many times and falling many times and sitting with many uncomfortable truths, but it can be uncovered. Now let us talk about what the return actually looks like in practical terms, in lived terms, because I am not going to leave you with abstraction. The return begins with the one thing the Nafs hates most: stillness. Not meditation necessarily, just stillness. Just a moment of not running, a moment of not picking up the phone, a moment of not immediately filling the silence with something, a moment of sitting with yourself exactly as you are, without agenda, without fixing. And in that moment, if you are still enough, you will begin to hear things you have been drowning out. You will hear the qalb, its unease, its searching, its genuine desire for something real. You will hear the ruh, its quiet, non-urgent, non-dramatic knowing. And you will hear the nafs, and this time you will recognize it, not as your voice, as the voice that is trying to get you to stand up, to move, to reach for something, to escape the stillness. And you will be able to stay, not forever, not for a long time, maybe just a moment longer than yesterday. And that extra moment is the beginning. Here is the last thing. The reason you cannot trust yourself is not that you are untrustworthy. It is that you have been listening to the wrong voice and calling it yourself. The nafs is loud, the ruh is quiet. And for so long you have lived in a world that rewards loudness, but you are not the loudness. You are the thing that hears it. You are the witnessing, the awareness, the part that can observe the nafs without being the nafs, the part that can feel the pull and know it is a pull. That part of you has never broken a promise. That part of you has never self-sabotaged. That part of you has never scrolled when it should have been present. That part of you is always already where it is supposed to be. The work is not to become a better person. The work is to return to the person you already are, underneath everything that has been layered over it. And that return is available to you tonight, in this moment, in the next choice you make, not because you are finally strong enough, not because the nafs has suddenly become weak, but because the direction is still there and you still know which way to face. The problem was never that you could not trust yourself. The problem was that you did not know which self to trust.